It's Panorama on BBC One Northern Ireland now, going inside the COVID testing lab.
My name is Jackie Wakefield. I'm secretly filming inside one of the largest laboratories testing for coronavirus in the UK. It's made me really angry, and there's been times on shift where I've really had to bite my tongue.
Oh, did you see that?
My evidence reveals how some people could be getting the wrong result.
What you're seeing here is just absolutely crazy. There is almost zero question that this would lead to contamination.
The government has spent over £1 billion setting up a network of testing labs, including this one in Milton Keynes.
Hi folks, I'm here at the Milton Keynes Mega Lab, where they're doing a most phenomenal amount of testing.
But I find frustrated staff losing faith in the system.
What do the X's mean?
X's mean it's garbage.
Every tube is a person. You have to think that way. And probably quite a scared person or a worried person.
As we begin to return to normal life, can we trust testing to help keep us safe?
You just cannot run a service like this. Who's in charge here?
I'm so motivated to go in and really find out what's happening there. It's so important to get testing right because essentially that's our first line of defence with COVID. Testing is a cornerstone of the government's fight against coronavirus. The most reliable tests are called PCR. Thousands of samples every day are sent here to one of the UK's biggest labs, Milton Keynes. Panorama has been told by sources about poor practices at the lab. It's January, and I'm going undercover to investigate.
Hi, how's it going? Oh, thank you.
I'm a science graduate with lab experience. I've had 4.5 days training, and I'm being paid £13.57 an hour as a lab technician.
All right, well, good luck.
We're disguising the identities of all the people I'm working with.
Morning, yeah, good, how are you?
I start working in what's called the debagging area. As soon as I start unpacking samples, I notice a number of the tubes they come in leak. The lab has to deal with at least 8 different types of tubes. We're supposed to check for leaky ones when we open the bags.
Oh, okay, well, big ones now. They tend to leak. Is it as much as the little orange ones?
I'd say so.
It's a pain.
We do our best to clean up the leaks, to try to prevent contamination, but we're working fast and we don't always spot them. Panorama has asked 2 experts to review my evidence. Chris Denning runs a university lab that can do 2,600 coronavirus tests a day.
If there's a faulty element in the pipeline that's been identified, then that needs to be addressed. If these are being handled inappropriately and they keep on breaking, that needs to be investigated.
Phil Robinson used to run a genetic testing company doing millions of PCR tests.
Yeah, it's just not acceptable. There are multiple tubes for a start. There should only be one. But you're telling me there's more than one and you've got ones that are leaking consistently. Who's in charge here?
The government says that all tubes meet strict standards and that they work with suppliers to continuously improve processes. Over the past year, the UK has built up its testing capacity, so more than 700,000 PCR tests can now be carried out every day. Milton Keynes can do around 70,000 a day. By February, each team of 2 is told to sort 8 lots of 93 samples every hour. The lab says it's essential people get results quickly, and that staff can work at that pace regardless of how many samples actually arrive on any given day.
Do you find it easy to do all the checks and stuff on making the targets?
To hit 8, not really, because you need to check. This is correct, you need to check if it's not leaking, then you can cut it, So all of these, we can do max 6, we can't do 8 per hour, as hard as we try,
Each sample and the bag it arrives in should have a barcode, and we're supposed to check that they match. It's how we can be sure the results get sent to the right people.
In training, they told us to match the barcodes, right? I don't know if they did that with you, but they told us to make sure this barcode and this barcode are the same.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you're going to sit down and do this many samples now, there's no way you can double check that every time.
Yeah, you can't.
It's not feasible.
What, you don't think would you not meet target?
I mean, I don't think so.
What we should also be looking out for is sample tubes arriving without barcodes on them. Otherwise, they could get lost in the system.
Have you ever done it on shift where you properly checked everything?
First shift, that's why.
Oh, you did the first shift?
First shift, not even then, really, in the first hour or 2. And then I just looked at everyone else, and everyone else was opening and shoving things in. So I was like, alright, no one's doing anything.
After 4 shifts opening bags, I moved to a new section. And it's not long before we have a tube that doesn't seem to have a barcode.
I'm sorry, triple check that it doesn't have a barcode.
Yeah.
The thing is though, most of the time, when you look at a barcode, the barcode is on the bag. So it's like a waste of all the samples, because then we could have...
Oh, you could have actually tracked it.
But it looks like nobody noticed the barcode was missing before they threw the bag away.
She had to chuck one sample that didn't have a barcode on it. So that means, yeah, it's not logged into the system. That person who took that test isn't going to get told a result. And everyone talks about having at least a few a day of these sorts of samples. So essentially, if that's getting missed at that stage, it results in a whole bunch of people not finding out.
So if I was ill and that happened,
Yeah.
just because someone was so lazy to throw it away, and then you get sick as well.
Yeah.
Or wanting to go out to work, or trying to arrange childcare, whatever, you know what I mean?
Do you find it easy to do all the checks and stuff on making the targets?
So hit 8, not really.
If you try and put arbitrary targets on, we must hit this number, that puts undue pressure on people, and then people are going to make mistakes, or they're going to rush it because they feel there's no option for them.
It forces the operator to basically cut corners.
So I guess from the lab's perspective, they have to do a lot of tests, have to push people quickly.
I understand that, but there are ways of making things faster, and it's not by doing things at lower quality because your process is incorrect.
Last April, the Milton Keynes lab, which is run by a not-for-profit company called UK Biocentre, became the UK's first coronavirus lighthouse lab.
Hi folks, I'm here at the Milton Keynes Mega Lab, where they're doing a most phenomenal amount of testing, which is absolutely essential for our ability to defeat the virus.
After the pandemic started, the government moved to ramp up the UK's community testing capacity. Milton Keynes is one of 7 lighthouse labs brought on stream by Number 10. Nearly £6 billion has been set aside for them. More than £1 billion has been spent so far. When Milton Keynes began testing for coronavirus, academics from universities across the country offered their help.
I was a small part of this tremendous team that established from nothing, that I think generated a truly miraculous outcome. When I left in last year, the standards were still extraordinary, and they still had a real focus. That there were individuals, particularly from Oxford University, who had a real focus on quality. But they were absolutely relentless that every sample would get tested and every sample would get put through.
During the summer, many of the scientists left to go back to their full-time jobs. Many of the 70 technicians on my team are recent graduates. There are 850 people working here now, and 4 different teams in the lab. Were you worried about standards and quality once you left the lab?
I think there was a genuine change in the level of experience of the staff that were joining as compared to the ones that left. Every tube is a person. You have to think that way, and probably quite a scared person or a worried person. We have a responsibility, or certainly when I was working, I had a responsibility to get those results back to them.
When those academics left, there was a significant rise in the number of people taking tests. When schools and colleges returned after summer, the testing system struggled to cope. A report by MPs in March found the system never met the target of consistently getting results back within 24 hours. They said it's not clear it can justify its unimaginable costs. Before the pandemic, there was already a network of smaller local and NHS labs, but they didn't have enough capacity. Sir John Oldham's a health expert who's worked for 5 governments and 10 secretaries of state. He believes it would have been better to focus on expanding the existing system.
The test, track and trace was built, from my perspective, in the wrong way. If instead of having spent the billions we have creating a new system, we'd spent probably less than that reinforcing the existing system, I think we would have been a lot better off. That failure contributed to a reason that we had a higher death rate and that we had the biggest economic hit from COVID of any G7 country.
The government says it has built from scratch the largest network of diagnostic testing facilities in British history, which has carried out over 110 million COVID tests. It says it's worked with highly experienced partners in the public and private sector and made it clear that public authorities must achieve value for taxpayers. It says 3 new Lighthouse labs have opened, which are managed by local NHS trusts.
Now, the UK's biggest testing lab has been hit by an outbreak of coronavirus.
It's being reported a number of scientists at the centre in Milton Keynes in Buckinghamshire have been affected.
3 months before that outbreak, the Health and Safety Executive had warned that workers here were being put at risk by insufficient cleaning and social distancing.
We only started wearing masks like November.
Really? Why'd they start?
You had like an outbreak in the lab.
How many people got it?
Hopefully like 10 in time.
10 in November?
Yeah, and then like 10 in December.
Other people test positive too, while I'm here in January and February. The lab says it's improved its safety standards and is meeting HSE guidelines. But the lab's social distancing rules are widely ignored.
Were people like more careful like when everyone was sick?
Let's just play something up there.
Huh?
Let's just play something up. No one cares.
The lab has the capacity to run around 70,000 tests each day, but the number of samples actually arriving is much lower. During my time at the lab, we usually did between 18 and 40,000 a day. A lot of the time, we don't have much to do.
You want to go outside for smoke?
Yeah, why not? Yes.
During that same week, the UK reaches one of many miserable milestones.
There's been more grim news on the coronavirus, with the number of COVID deaths recorded in the last 24 hours more than 1,800. That's yet another record since the pandemic began.
You've got one of the biggest COVID labs in the UK not utilising their capabilities. 70 people doing nothing, machines not running, essentially just paying a bunch of people to sit around.
The government says it's appropriate for labs to operate below maximum capacity so they can respond quickly to outbreaks and allow for training and maintenance. Whatever the number of samples arriving, we try to process them quickly. I've now moved on to working with the robotic machines that are at the heart of mass testing. This one pipettes 8 samples at a time onto processing plates. The PCR test is so sensitive, it can detect the slightest trace of coronavirus, so it's essential there's no contamination.
Oh, look at that gloopy.
Some of the samples are quite thick and gloopy, and the machine is dragging them across what's supposed to be a clean plate.
Oh, did you see that?
If a gloopy sample is positive and it contaminates the plate, it could mean people being told they're positive when they're not, having to self-isolate when they don't need to.
I think it was just a bit gloopy. Oh, there's another one. Oh. Had a lot on this one. Look at that gloopy boy.
It looks like there could be contamination to me, but this technician who's training me on the machine doesn't seem to think it's a problem.
One of like the pipette tips sort of like dripped as it was going across. I couldn't really tell where it went.
If it goes over the plate, then you better like start again.
And do most people not?
A lot of people, like, if they see it, they'll like pause it and like wipe it off.
Technicians wipe off the gloopy samples with their gloves or a tissue.
Terrible. Beyond terrible. Very surprised that it's been allowed to get to this low level.
What you're seeing here is just absolutely crazy. It's crazy. That there is almost zero question that this would lead to contamination. The amount of virus and genetic material that is required to create a positive is absolutely minuscule. So that action of touching it and then moving on to the next and touching that, every time there's a point of contact like that, there's potential for contamination. As soon as you see that, just stop the system, find out what is going on, because there's no point in carrying on with those samples because the chance of contamination is just so high.
The lab says operators are trained to stop the process run in progress, clean down the system, and start the run again from scratch. There's another problem. I also see the test swabs stick to the machine's pipettes. My colleagues put their hand in the machine to push the swabs back down, Again, it feels like a contamination risk, so I ask my trainer what to do.
I think a swab carried across.
Oh, alright. You can just like pick it off the tip, or you can just like knock it back in the tube. Like, it's not a big deal, as long as it doesn't go away.
The sticky swabs sometimes fall across other people's samples.
What can we do?
I see my colleagues handle swabs a lot.
Oh yeah. What just happened? Was it fine?
Yeah, it just went back into the test.
Oh, it just fell back in.
I mean, this is
disgusting.
This is the bit that just perhaps shocks me just more than anything else that I've seen. If that solution has got a full infection in there of millions of particles and you start bouncing this around, naturally little droplets are going to spray off in all different directions and they're going to go into all the neighbouring tubes. This is not okay.
Back when the lab opened, swabs were removed from the tubes before samples went through the machine. But the lab says it was time-consuming and laborious, and trials it carried out showed leaving swabs in the tubes is safe and carries less contamination risk than removing them by hand. Our experts disagree.
They're doing something which borders on criminal in a lab. This is about as disgusting as I have ever seen. You're going to have false positives everywhere. So all these people are going to be told that they have COVID when they haven't.
The lab says its training makes clear operators must pause the system to manually intervene. If contamination is suspected, the run must be stopped, the system cleaned down, and a new run started from scratch. After each person's test is completed, results are checked by these scientists. They're responsible for quality control. This shows a plate of 93 results. The orange X's are inconclusive results. This many suggests contamination.
What do the X's mean?
It's garbage.
Oh wow. How did so many get contaminated, do you think? Because it looks like there's only 2 true positives.
That's a question I'm asking. Yeah, so at the beginning, I should finish the nights after 2. By 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, it things are getting again. By the time the 8 o'clock comes around, you see massive, half of the plate is garbage. So everything that comes out of the lab is garbage. And we're just trying to work around it so that the management can get what they want. They want to say to Prime Minister Boris Johnson, we produce 70,000 results every day. Now they're looking for numbers. Like they need us to produce like 70,000 results every day.
It's much better to have less numbers going through, but of higher quality, than hitting numbers that are meaningless, really. Let's face it, if none of those results were any good whatsoever out of the 70,000, do you call it 70,000 or do you call it 0?
In all, I speak to 3 scientists at length, from my team and 2 others, whose job it is to check the quality of results. They each show me plates they think are contaminated. One says management wants to improve things, but 2 say every day hundreds of results are on plates they think are contaminated and should be retested.
Each of those should either have a clear positive or a clear negative result on it that tells you what is going on in that sample. It just shouldn't be happening. If this happened once in a blue moon, well, that's life. But as a standard, no.
This scientist says he feels under pressure to simply declare the orange results void. If your result is void, you have to get another test, and that could mean waiting longer to find out if you have the virus or not. He thinks any plate with so many orange results, potentially caused by contamination, should be retested. Instead, he says the negative results seen here marked green and and the positive results seen here marked red are released.
Even if it's half of the plate, they just want us to turn the samples for it and release it. But from a clinical perspective, if you actually ask for it to be rerun, that's sort of the process.
Do you think that's a good idea, or do you reckon it would be better to rerun it?
It depends on what point you're looking at. From a political point of view, clearly I can send it out. From a scientific point of view, send it for rerun.
So would you have any confidence in the positives on that plate?
No, is the straight answer to that. If you've got that level of contamination on the plate which shows as a positive, how do you know the positives are positive?
The lab says it doesn't pressure staff, and its sample void rate is as good or better than other substantial testing centres in the country. It says its test positivity rate closely tracks the average for the UK, providing reassurance its results are robust and trustworthy. It says there may have been isolated mistakes by individual staff, but that this is inevitable in a laboratory that processes up to 70,000 samples each day. I've completed 18 shifts at Milton Keynes over 2 months. What I've seen here makes me wonder if we can fully trust the system to handle our results properly, or even to get them right.
I think mistakes are forgivable. Not learning from them isn't. And for me, that means moving it to a proper NHS test, track and trace, where it's rooted in the local public health teams, rooted in local NHS labs and facilities. This isn't going to go away. And we do need that greater resilience. And I have huge faith in people around the system have the wherewithal and the intelligence to really get this right, and we need to get this right.
The lab says this program is an incomplete and selective representation of its efforts, and that while I was filming, it was operating under a unique period of pressure due to the second wave. It says it has contributed significantly to the pandemic response. It operates in line with industry best practice and has been recommended for accreditation by the regulator. The government says it demands the highest standards, takes concerns extremely seriously, and will be fully investigating all the allegations that have been made.
People in the lab tend to forget that these are real people's samples. You're processing hundreds of samples every day. You're told to speed up, speed up, speed up. Yeah, I think it's very easy to forget that there's real people waiting at the end of this, and what we do has consequences for those people.
A third wave is spreading across Europe. I hope the system we've invested so much money in and so much faith in can do what it was designed to do and help keep us all safe.
EastEnders next tonight for us, and then later on BBC 4 has a Storyville documentary going back to 2015 when a fire in a nightclub in Romania led to an investigation into their healthcare system. That's at 9 o'clock.